The Andes stretched like an endless wall of stone and cloud, their peaks wrapped in mist. At the foot of these mountains lay a quiet village where terracotta roofs glowed under the late afternoon sun. It was here that little Lucia lived with her grandmother, in a small adobe house at the edge of the fields. Lucia was known for her laughter. Her dark braids would bounce as she ran through the dusty lanes, chasing after the village dogs or helping her grandmother gather maize. Yet behind her bright eyes there was a shadow that no one seemed to notice. She often spoke of something she called her secret games. At first, the other children thought it was nothing more than a silly invention, a way to make herself sound special. They laughed, asked her what kind of games she meant, but she would always smile nervously and change the subject. Her teacher, Señora Marisol, was a patient woman with sharp eyes. She had taught in the village for many years and knew when something did not sit right. One morning, while her pupils were busy drawing, she noticed Lucia sitting apart from the others, bent low over her paper. When the bell rang, Marisol collected the drawings. Her hand froze when she reached Lucia's. It was not the usual picture of flowers or birds. Instead, it showed a small child standing in a dark room, tears streaming down her face. Above the child, written in shaky letters, were the words, "This is not a game." Marisol's heart quickened. She looked up, but Lucia had already slipped out of the classroom, her satchel swinging behind her. The teacher sat at her desk long after the children had gone, staring at the drawing. Something inside her whispered that the mountains had carried a secret into her classroom, and it was heavier than she dared to imagine. The following day, Señora Marisol greeted her pupils with her usual warm smile, though her mind was far from calm. She watched Lucia closely. The girl avoided her eyes, clutching her satchel tightly to her chest as if guarding something. During the lesson, Marisol gently asked her pupils to draw again. Flowers, homes, animals appeared on the paper. But Lucia did not pick up her crayons. She simply stared at the blank page, her lips pressed together. When Marisol knelt beside her, the child whispered almost too softly to hear, "He says it is our secret." The words struck Marisol like a stone. She did not press further in front of the other children. Instead, she laid a gentle hand on Lucia's shoulder and whispered, "You are safe here." But the girl only lowered her gaze. That evening, Marisol walked home through the narrow streets of the village. The mountains loomed above, their peaks now shrouded in storm clouds. She thought about Lucia's words. In small villages, secrets often lived in silence. People preferred whispers to confrontation. But this secret could not be left in the shadows. Marisol returned to her desk late at night, lighting a single candle. She spread Lucia's drawing across the table. The lines were uneven, drawn with a trembling hand. The dark figure behind the crying child was nothing more than a shadow, yet it seemed alive, looming, threatening. Marisol touched the page, her chest heavy with dread. She knew children often expressed truths in drawings they could not voice aloud. And she knew that if she ignored this, Lucia might sink further into silence. The storm outside rattled the window. Marisol folded the drawing carefully and placed it inside a notebook. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would find a way to reach Lucia's heart without breaking her fragile courage. She prayed the mountains would grant her strength. The next day, during break, Marisol saw Lucia slip away from the other children. Instead of playing in the courtyard, she walked towards a narrow path behind the school that led to the river. Marisol followed quietly. Lucia crouched by the water, tossing stones without joy. Marisol approached slowly, her voice calm. "Lucia, you know you can tell me anything." The girl hesitated, then whispered, "If I tell, he will be angry. He says it is only a game." Marisol felt her stomach twist. She crouched down beside her, speaking softly. "You are brave, Lucia. And real games do not make you afraid." Tears welled in the girl's eyes, but before she could say more, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Lucia flinched and clutched her satchel. Marisol turned, but no one was there. Only the whispering wind moved through the trees. That evening, Lucia did not go straight home. Instead, she wandered the lanes, her shadow long in the setting sun. She glanced over her shoulder again and again, as though expecting someone to appear. An old woman selling maize by the roadside watched her carefully. The villagers often spoke in murmurs about things that should not be named. The woman crossed herself as Lucia passed. Secrets were like echoes here, bouncing between the stone walls, but never spoken aloud. At home, Lucia's grandmother served her warm soup, but the child ate little. She excused herself early, curling under her blanket. She closed her eyes, yet sleep did not come easily. In her dreams, the shadow figure stood at her doorway, whispering, "This is our game, and you must never tell." Days passed. Marisol noticed that Lucia's laughter had almost vanished. She sat silent in class, her crayons untouched, her gaze fixed on the window where the mountains loomed. One morning, the girl dropped her pencil. When Marisol bent to pick it up, she noticed bruises faintly visible beneath the cuff of her sleeve. Lucia snatched her arm back quickly, hiding it beneath the desk. Marisol's heart pounded. She wanted to cry out, but she knew sudden alarm might frighten the girl further. Instead, she whispered, "You are not alone, Lucia. Remember that." The girl's lips quivered, but she said nothing. The silence in the room grew heavier than the storm clouds gathering over the peaks. It was after class, when the other children had gone, that Lucia finally lingered by Marisol's desk. She twisted the strap of her satchel in her small hands. "Señora," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "he says it is a secret game, but it hurts." Marisol froze, her throat tight. She knelt, holding the girl's trembling hands. Lucia's eyes brimmed with tears, her lips shaking as though she had carried these words for too long. "You are safe now," Marisol said gently. "Thank you for trusting me." The child nodded faintly, but fear still clung to her face. Somewhere beyond the classroom walls, the sound of footsteps echoed again, as though the secret itself was listening. The village was small. Everyone knew each other's names, each other's habits. But behind closed doors, shadows often moved unseen. Marisol felt the weight of many eyes on her as she walked through the plaza with Lucia by her side. Whispers followed. Some glanced at her with suspicion, others with quiet understanding. The truth was dangerous here. Speaking it aloud was like calling thunder down from the mountains. That night, Marisol wrote in her journal by candlelight. She promised herself she would not let the whispers silence her. Lucia had been brave enough to speak. Now it was her duty to carry that truth, no matter how heavy. The days grew darker as the rainy season arrived. Heavy clouds pressed against the peaks, rivers swelled, and the air was thick with the scent of earth. Marisol noticed a change in the man who lived near Lucia's house. He avoided her gaze when they crossed paths in the plaza. His silence was sharp, his movements restless. It was as though he knew the truth was slowly rising, like water before a flood. Lucia clung more often to her grandmother, her laughter gone entirely now. Each night, she checked the corners of her room before lying down, as if the shadow might be waiting there. The storm outside mirrored the one that brewed within the village walls. Something was coming. One evening, lightning split the sky above the mountains. Rain hammered the rooftops, rattling the windows. In her small classroom, Marisol waited. She had asked Lucia to meet her there, away from prying eyes. The girl arrived soaked, her braids dripping, her satchel pressed tightly against her chest. She stepped inside, shivering, and whispered, "I cannot keep it secret anymore." Marisol drew her close, wrapping her in a blanket. "You do not have to carry it alone," she said softly. Lucia buried her face in her teacher's shoulder, sobbing as the storm raged outside. At last, the secret was breaking free, carried on the sound of her trembling voice. The mountains echoed with thunder, but within the classroom, there was a fragile sense of hope. The first step had been taken, and there would be no turning back.